Hey there! So, I have received a lot of requests to review a Nakaya fountain pen. That is a very exclusive Japanese brand. I'm going to adjust my camera a bit. It's a very exclusive Japanese brand, and I never got around to buying one. These are really expensive pens. So I was discussing this with fellow pen reviewer Aziza, Gourmet Pens from gourmetpens.com, and she said, "Well, I have one. You can borrow it for review purposes." Well, of course, I'd be mad if I would say no to that, so I said, "Send it over." Now, because it had to be shipped, she didn't send the box. I think they come in wooden boxes that are very fancy. These are really high-end pens. I can't show you the box, but you undoubtedly can find um, information on that online. So here is the pen. The pen is a Piccolo, which means it's a small pen, definitely small. What she did send me is the very cute pen kimono, which you can unwrap. And then out comes the pen. And the pen, these are handmade pens. And as you can see, this is definitely a small one. But I believe this is the Akataminori finish. That's what I want to say. In any case, it's handmade, hand lacquered, and that explains why these pens are quite expensive. I'm going to cover the parts of the pen. I'll tell you what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and then I'll do a writing sample. Okay, so let's start at the finial. What is really nice about this lacquer is that you have this black lacquer with the red highlights. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but I think it should be fairly obvious that you have these nice red highlights. Then you have the cap. It's fairly cigar shaped, and then you have a little fluted thing there with more red, and then you have the end, which also has that red in there. So that is quite nice. It's very smooth. That lacquer feels very, very smooth to the touch. And you open the pen by unscrewing the cap. Now, I suppose you could post this, but I wouldn't do it because you probably don't want to damage the lacquer, right? So here you have the section. The section, as you can see, nicely designed. You've got the threads, then you have a nice tapered thing, and then it flares out a bit. And then you have the 14K nib. Now you can get all kinds of nibs, and you can have them customized so that they have become more flexible too. That was not done with this one. And what you get here is a nice 14K nib, and this is the fine nib. You fill these pens quite simply with a converter. The people who are behind Platinum are also behind Nakaya. They're absolute nib meisters, pen maker meisters, whatever you like to call that. Hence the Platinum converter. And that's pretty much all there's to it, I think, as to the pen. As you can see in the section, you get that nice black and red finish too. So, what do I like about the pen and what do I not like about the pen? Well, when you hold this, it feels exclusive. Everything about the pen feels expensive, well made. As I said, they are handmade. Take a sip of tea. So they have a very nice feel to them. This one is quite small. I mean, for me, using this unposted is actually pushing it. I mean, if it would be much smaller, I wouldn't be able to use it without posting. But still, it's fairly comfortable, very well balanced. So that's nice. The nib definitely performs well. For it is a fine, it is a Japanese fine, so typically that's one nib grade below Western. So fine Japanese is actually Western extra fine, which means there isn't that much tipping material to polish, which means that you will feel some feedback when you write. But even though there is feedback, it's not unpleasant feedback, and it's actually a very nice pen to write with. Excellent flow. It doesn't really run dry, and it has very consistent flow, and that is something I've seen in many Japanese pens. They don't skip, they just have this beautiful flow. So they've done something very well with the feed, which actually looks pretty fancy too. So they've definitely gotten that right. Okay, now Things I don't like about it. Well, I believe this goes for 515 euros for a pretty small pen. So I think that is something we should discuss. Is it worth the price? For me, this one would not be worth the price. The reason quite simply being that it's so small. And considering the size of my hands, I mean, this is my middle finger. I'm not giving you the finger, don't worry. But the pen, uncapped, isn't that much bigger than one of my fingers. So personally, I would like a bigger pen that's more comfortable for me to hold, but clearly that will depend on your hand size, your preferences, etc. And the model is called Piccolo, so it's supposed to be small. That's just the way it is. All I'm saying is you still pay a high price for a small pen. And yes, it is handmade, so definitely add for that. Yes, it's a 14K nib, but you know, personally, I would not pay that price for this specific model. I would definitely be tempted to pay money for a bigger Nakaya model because they are very well made and it's just wonderful. These little red lines, it's very hard to capture on camera, but they are fairly intense red at the edge, and then they fade into the black like a morning sun when the sun is, you know, rising and you still have a black sky and it's sort of moving. So it's very nice. It's very subtle. So I like a lot of things about that. The price, though, for me, for this particular model, would not be justified for me personally, but for other people it definitely would be. Okay, let's take a few measurements and then we'll do a writing sample. As to weight, with some ink in there, I get about 20 grams. It's not very heavy. As to size, I have 130 millimeters capped, uncapped. I have 116 millimeters. Section diameter, of course, careful not to damage the lacquer. I have about 10.5 millimeters at the narrowest point and about 12 millimeters at the widest point. That's all I have to say about the Nakaya Piccolo. More than enough talk. Now we need to see this in action. Aziza, thank you for lending me this pen. Guys, I hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye bye. Okay, so here we go with a Nakaya Piccolo. Now I have to tell you, I'm terribly sorry. I do not recall which ink this is. Oops, Piccolo. The nib is fine. It's and the ink is it's a brown. And to me it looks a little bit like that Mont Blanc Leonardo limited edition ink, but I honestly don't recall, so I'm sorry. Bit of writing. What you notice when writing with this is a lot of feedback, but it is a fine nib, and being a Japanese fine, it is very fine indeed. But although there is feedback, it is not scratchy. It's just feedback. You feel there is contact with the paper, but there is no getting stuck on the paper or anything like that. So that is very nice. When you do fast writing, there is not a single skip, and even with the slightest of pressure, now I'm just putting the pen here, not applying any pressure, and it writes very, very nice. When it comes to wetness, especially for a fine, I think it's a pretty wet nib. When it comes to flex, you can have flex added to these pens when you order them, but even without that there is a little bit of line variation to be had, but you have to push down, and it's not a very pleasant writing experience when you do that. You get caught in the paper a bit more. So something that a lot of people enjoy, reverse writing. As you can see, it's possible with the pen upside down, although of course even upside, what do you call that, held correctly, it's already quite fine, so you don't get a much finer line when you reverse it. So in all, I would say this is a very interesting pen. Definitely a fascinating one to try. Very expensive, but you do get a very nice pen for that. Guys, I hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.